All right, so this slide should look familiar. Don't write it down. Okay, remember we already looked at this slide. We said we were going to talk about these things. We are not writing this down. You guys already wrote it down. But I wanted to recap. So we've been talking about microevolution. Microevolution is evolution on what kind of level? We said micro means small. What's really, really small? Genes, DNA. Microevolution is evolution on a gene level. And we said this happens with populations. Remember, a population is a group of organisms that can interbreed. So we've talked about each one of these things, okay? We've talked about how microevolution happens. We've talked about natural selection. So the idea that those that are best adapted to their environment survive and reproduce. We talked about gene flow, when one population or organisms from one population move to another, okay? We talked about the founder effect, when a small population moves and colonizes a new place without any other organisms already there. We talked about bottlenecks, so events that kill off a big chunk of the species. So something like a tornado or a fire or a disease. And then we talked about mutations. So we have to talk about one last one here. So find where you have number 5 in your notes with mutations. And we're going to add number 6, the very last one. Okay, so this is the video clip you guys just watched on those birds. So number 6 here is called sexual selection. Okay, so you guys saw that those birds picked their mates based on what kind of traits they had. All right. So when individuals in a population choose their mates based on their traits, this is called sexual selection. You guys do this all the time, okay? You guys see somebody who you think is attractive. Maybe they've got, I don't know, brown hair and blue eyes, and you decide you want to go out with them. Now, it doesn't always happen. You don't always get to go out with them, right? But you guys choose mates based on their traits. If you were to see, I don't know, some girl with her teeth knocked out and really ratty hair, you probably wouldn't want to date her, right? So individuals in a population choose mates based on their traits. Okay, so in this picture down here, we see this female frog right here. She's looking at these 2 other frogs. Here's one that can play the piano. He looks pretty awesome. He can sing. And then there's this sickly old one that like can't really sing that well, and he's not really doing that well. Okay. So this is the last way that we can get microevolution happening. So we get genes happening when individuals pick which people they want to mate with, because eventually sickly old frog genes are not going to end up staying in the population because they're not going to be able to reproduce because nobody's going to want to reproduce with them. Okay. So this is the idea of sexual selection. Okay. All right, we're going to kind of switch gears. This is kind of a whole bunch of random stuff thrown together, but it all kind of relates. You guys did the lab with the cereal yesterday. So the cereal lab, you guys counted how many genes were in the populations. Okay, so you counted how many colors were in those populations. Now, when you guys had that really big population, okay, you counted how many colors. And then when you had the small, like 3 rainbow puff population, you counted how many colors there were, right? How many genes. So which of those populations had the most genes? We realized that the biggest population, the big cupful, had the most colors or the most genes. So what we're going to write down today all talks about these populations and how they survive. Which populations are most likely to survive, okay? The big populations, right? If they're small, there's more of a chance that they're going to die out, okay? And then populations with lots of different genes. So it's not just enough to have a whole lot of members in a population. If they're all genetically the same, then there's a really good chance that a disease or a predator or a natural disaster could wipe them all out because none of them have a better chance of surviving than any of the other ones. But if they have lots of different genes and traits, then chances are maybe a couple of them will end up surviving. Think about it if you read any like sci-fi or apocalyptic kind of like movies, if you've seen any of those, where there's a disease that spreads across the entire earth, right? And it kills a whole bunch of people and there's only a few survivors. Well, the reason there's survivors is because some of those people had genes that made them more resistant to that disease, because there's always survivors in those kinds of movies and books, right? If everyone died, there wouldn't be anything to film about. So in order for populations to survive, we got to have some individuals with different traits so that chances are some of them will be able to survive. If you need more time writing this down, just have the sub pause this so you guys can write it down. Okay? All right. So those are our two random slides that we had to fit in. They all kind of go with populations, but what we're really going to talk about today is a little bit more of natural selection. So you guys know about natural selection, all right? We talked way back when about that bell curve. Remember we said a bell curve is how traits or genes are usually distributed in a population. This is a really lumpy bell curve here, all right? But we said a lot of individuals have the middle or average kind of trait, and there aren't very many over here or over here. So I use the example of height. There's a lot of people in the middle who are like 5'5", 6 foot, not a lot of people that are 4 feet, not a lot of people that are 7 feet when they're fully grown. Well, when natural selection happens and we get these genes changing, we can get different patterns. Okay, so we're going to talk about those different patterns. So what I need you to write down on this slide is just the underlined part right here. Okay, you're writing down just this part. Do not worry about any of these pictures. Don't worry about any of the words. In fact, here, I'll cover them up for you. We'll come back to these later, okay? All right. So 3 patterns of natural selection. How do we get different patterns from this bell curve? And notice, I have these bell curves drawn on this graph. They're in green here. And we're going to see we can get different shapes depending on how our gene frequencies or our allele frequencies change over time, okay? All right, I'm just going to hit undo so we can have all that back for later. Now, the first pattern, and before I have you write this, I'm going to explain it so you listen to me, all right? Because I know how this goes. You guys won't listen, and then you'll just be writing, and then you won't know what I said. Okay, so let's say, for example, let me come up with a good example here. Let's say that we have a population of rabbits, okay? And this population of rabbits can either have short legs, medium legs, or long legs, okay? Now, let's say that the ones with really short legs, okay, so normally, if we're looking at this bell curve, right, the ones with really short legs over here, they can't run really fast, okay, because they don't have very long legs, right? So they end up dying because the wolves come and eat them. And the ones with really long legs, well, they end up tripping over their legs, so the wolves end up eating them too. So only the rabbits with medium length legs survive, okay? If that happens, we would get a graph that looks like this pink line here. We would get more of them in the middle. See how this one's higher here? That means there's more, okay? More of them that have these medium legs and less of them that have these kind of small or large legs. That's called stabilizing selection. So stabilizing selection says that individuals with the average form of a trait have the highest fitness. And remember, fitness is the ability to survive and reproduce, okay? I'll let you write this down. Go ahead and pause it if you need more time. So what I want you to do is we're going to draw a picture of this graph, okay? Because we need to have this graph in our notes. So we're going to draw an L here. Okay, so this is what you're going to do to draw this graph. Now, we're going to draw this bell curve. Okay, so this is, remember, the bell curve is the normal way that traits are distributed. It's really hard to draw with a mouse, but I think I'm doing all right. Okay, so this is the normal thing, and we're drawing it as a dashed line just so we know what normal is. Okay, in stabilizing selection, we have more in the middle and less on the outside here. So what I need you to do is draw a really tall, skinny peak right here. More in the middle than mine is, all right? Kind of like this picture right here. So this is what a graph is going to look like. Okay, we have number of individuals over here, and then we have like their trait down here. So this is saying that the ones with the medium are surviving. The ones with the small legs are not. The ones with the large legs are not either, because this is like zero population and this is tall population. All right, next example. Let's say we have lizards, okay? And let's say that the lizards with really small tails, or the really small lizards, can hide in really tight crevices and they can hide from predators, so they survive. So small lizards survive. The large lizards can fight off predators, so they can survive too. But the medium lizards don't survive. When that happens, we get a graph that looks like this, okay? So we have the small ones surviving and the big ones surviving, but none or very few surviving that are medium, okay? So this is called disruptive selection. Individuals that have the extreme form, the small and the big, or the short and the tall of a trait, have the highest level of fitness. So in this example, they use butterflies. So here with the butterflies, the lighter ones, maybe they could blend into the sand. So there's lots of them because they could blend into the sand and they don't die. These ones here are darker. Maybe they can blend in with trees, the tree bark. The ones in the middle don't survive because they can't blend into anything. Okay, so that's why it dips down here, because there aren't very many that survive in the middle. Again, pause this if you need more time to write. Okay, I just want to make sure we get through all of this. And then directional selection. Oh, sorry, we forgot to write the graph. Let's go back here. So draw an L. Okay, we're drawing our dashed line again. I apologize that I'm going through this really quickly. Again, pause it if you need to, but I can only record 15 minutes at a time. All right, and then we're going to draw an M, a really curvy M. So that's what disruptive selection looks like. Okay, so draw that really curvy M in your notes. Okay. All right, the last pattern, okay, the last pattern is called directional selection. So let's say, for example, that we have a population of giraffes, and over time their legs go from an average of 40 centimeters to an average of 45 centimeters. So the average just shifted over a little bit, okay? It just shifted to the right or to the left. So this is called directional selection. Individuals that display a more extreme form of a trait have the greatest fitness. Again, the definitions, I don't think they're the greatest in describing this. So why don't you go ahead, pause this, you can write down the definition. So when we draw the graph for this, we're going to draw it an L, right? We're going to draw our bell curve, my really awful bell curve because it's really hard to do with a mouse. And then we're just going to draw a bell curve, but to the right of it. Now it's important to remember this could be to the right or to the left, either one, okay? All right, I got a minute and a half left, so I'm going to have the sub pause this and hand out the patterns of natural selection worksheet. All right, patterns of natural selection worksheet. Let's go through this. We'll do the first one. Starlings produce an average of 5 eggs in each clutch. If there are more than 5, the parents can't feed the young. If there are fewer than 5, predators may destroy the entire clutch. So 5 eggs becomes the most common clutch size. So 5 eggs, that's the middle number. It said if we have too many, right, predators will destroy them. If we don't have enough, or sorry, if there are fewer, predators will destroy them. If there are too many, they can't feed their young. So if we look at these, which one do you guys think that would be? These are the 3 patterns. I'll remove this box. Okay, which one do you think it would be? Stabilizing, disruptive, or directional selection? So it would be an example of stabilizing selection because the middle number is becoming more and more common. Okay. So what I want you to do is write stabilizing selection in that blank for number 1, okay, right here in this blank. And then on the graph, you're going to draw a picture of this stabilizing selection, if I can find it here, this pink line right here, Okay. All right, time's up. Have a fabulous day.